Hi everyone, hope you are doing well. I have a new background because I am not at home. There is no space in my house at the moment, well house, apartment, flat, to actually shoot a video. I am moving lots of vinyl records around. It's proving more challenging than perhaps I thought, but it means I've got nowhere to put a camera without the camera being skew from me being at a funny angle or something along those lines. So I have found somewhere else with this very sterile background, but maybe I'll learn to use it for green screens. Who knows? Now I'm going to talk about data. A few weeks ago, I think, I asked if anyone had any topics they wanted me to cover, and 3 responses came to mind on a very similar topic, which I'm going to try and go through today. One was the good uses of data. How are they used? How is data actually used for good, and why am I always so negative about data use and data collection? I'll come on to that in a second. One of them is, what do you do to stop people collecting data in an interpersonal situation, which I don't really have answers to either, but I'm going to have a go. But then someone wrote to me, basically referred a video to me by John Oliver about data brokers and what the impact of those might be in Hong Kong or the rest of the world. What I'm going to do is talk about that and also give you a link to the video so you can watch what I'm talking about, because it goes into more detail than I'll probably will in this 10-minute or so video. But first things, despite the fact that I'm a data lawyer and I talk about data protection all the time, I don't think that the collection of data is a bad thing. The accumulation of data, the use of the data does some incredible things. It's led to advances in terms of pharmaceuticals in ways that we could never imagine in terms of the way transport works. Uber wouldn't exist if it wasn't for data aggregation. Social media, I know it's taking your data and selling it and you might not be happy, but you are willingly giving that data away, and in that respect, it is a good thing. You would not be able to keep in touch with some of the people that people now keep in touch with through social media platforms were it not for the existence of social media. I bet there are many of them you wouldn't even be in touch with at all. You wouldn't remember who they were, this person you went to school with years and years ago. In terms of video conferencing tools which rely heavily on the use of data, the likes of Zoom, Skype, Teams, anything else you want to think about, again, we've just finished, or here in Hong Kong, we're still going through a major pandemic. Lots of people had their families on the other side of the world, they weren't able to speak to them. If we were not in a position where we had massive use of data, the transmission of data, free transmission of data, and advanced technologies that run on data, you would not be able to keep in touch with those people. You may not be able to have emailed them even, but you certainly wouldn't have been able to do video conferencing with them. I can remember, and I'm assuming most people watching this can remember, but maybe not, when things like getting in touch with someone via Skype, via a video call, were almost impossible unless you were very rich or living in space, which nobody was, but maybe not. Certainly, there are plenty of people now who won't remember that you could just send an email to someone, and I remember the excitement and enthusiasm that I had when I found out you could get someone's email address, write to someone on the other side of the world, and they would get your message within the space of a few seconds or minutes if you're on dial-up and it was a bit rubbish. So data is great, don't ever get me wrong. We do need to be careful on how data is processed and how it is used, and we do need safeguards on people's personal information and data that might be sensitive and that could cause harm if it is misused in some way. And my God, there is a lot of harm being done at the moment. So I don't know if this is because Hong Kong is in a weird pandemic situation where there's lots of talk of testing, there's lots of talks of people going to quarantine camps, but the sheer volume of text messages I get, WhatsApp messages I get, I'm sure if I was on WeChat I would get WeChat messages saying that I'm tested positive, I need to phone a number, which I'm sure will then ask me to send some money to someone or do something nefarious, has been off the chart. That data is being used for bad. It's been used either not maybe to cause an inconvenience, but also maybe used for crimes. We have plenty of cases here in Hong Kong where people are swindled into transferring lots of money to a bank account because they've been emailed by someone, the person is not who they seem, but somewhere along the chain some data has been stolen which has allowed this to happen. And that is bad. But I'm not going to talk about that. I've talked about that all the time. This is deliberately criminalization of data, really, using data for a criminal purpose. And yeah, it happens a lot. And really we should be trying to prevent that using existing data laws. What I want to talk about though is the way that data laws don't really stop a lot of what's going on. So, data laws, very quick primer, we've talked about them many times, I'm not going to go into loads of detail. Normally they will stop the collection of personal data, but it could be other data, without some sort of consent or jumping through some hurdle, and it will impose a penalty if you collect or use data you shouldn't have collected and use it for a purpose you shouldn't have used it for. That is the quickest summary I can give of data laws. By all means, watch a previous video that I've done on these and I'll give you more detail on the difference between European ones and Chinese ones and so on and so forth. But that is how they work. And generally, it kind of works in the EU, kind of works in Hong Kong, kind of works in China, kind of works in the US. If someone takes your data and then uses it without your consent, for a purpose that you didn't agree to, then you can go after, you complain to your local information commissioner, your cybersecurity administration, or whatever body it is, say this person's done something wrong, I want to go after them. And then maybe they will get investigated, maybe they'll get a fine, maybe in some states they'll go to prison. Certainly here in Hong Kong, if they were using that information for doxing, they could face a criminal penalty. They could go to prison for a couple of years, depending on the severity of the offence. So that's a thing, and the laws are great and they protect against that. But they only work if, one, you know that that data has been misused, and two, you know who's misused it and can actually report them. And actually that's becoming very difficult indeed. So one of the questions I was asked that prompted this video was, where data is being collected about me without my consent, what can I do? And my immediate reaction is, notify the Privacy Commissioner in Hong Kong. And it still is even in this instance, but they gave an example of when I am out with my children and someone's taking photos of my children without my consent, what do I do? Well, you can go up to them and ask them to stop. You can ask them to delete the photos, but I suppose you might put yourself in a dangerous situation. You could call the police, for example, but at that point they may already have uploaded the photos to some other cloud or some other system where you can't access them. They may say they've deleted them, but they haven't, or you may not even know they're doing it. And the point is, actually, there isn't very much you can do. Unless you know someone's doing something and you can get recourse easily, then you're stuck. The same goes if people are getting your information through hacking tools, if they've got it off the dark web. If you can't point to who is responsible for the loss of the data or who is responsible for the misuse of the data, if they are some shadowy figure, then data laws aren't going to help you at all. And that's kind of a bit of a worry. That's kind of a bit of an ugly side of the way that data goes everywhere. Now, you may be thinking, well, Haswell, I'm not really that worried about that because I know exactly how much data there is relating to me on the internet, and I don't share data willingly unless I've given consent. But have you always checked the terms and conditions on which that data is being transferred? The person who's collecting that data, have you checked what they are allowed to do with that data? Have you ever just typed something into a search box? Have you ever just typed something into an online form and not given it a second thought, but actually be surrendering some data? You might think, well, you know what, actually, Paul, maybe I've done that once or twice, but they'll probably only have something like my name or my email address. They won't have things like my phone number or identity of my children or anything relating to health conditions or anything else that could possibly cause me any trouble. Well, you'd probably be wrong if you think that. And I'm going to tell you a bit of a story. Now, if you've watched any videos or you've seen some of the terrible backgrounds I've had from having too many records hanging around, you'll know that I am a bit of a record collector. And many years ago, I used a website which I fully recommend called Discogs, where you catalogue your vinyl records, or CDs if you're using those, or whatever else. But vinyl records, for me, you can catalogue them, keep a track of your collection. You can also buy and sell records on there. And years ago, I think it was about 2015, I bought, and don't judge me, a Justin Timberlake box set for the 2020 experience off Discogs because I wasn't able to get it in Hong Kong. I bought it off someone who they just had a username. I'm not going to give what the username was. It's not important. Going to also probably incriminate me when I tell what I did. And I ordered it from them, and I waited for it to arrive, and it didn't arrive. And then I emailed the guy, said, look, you haven't sent the box set yet? He said, no, I haven't. And I said, well, can you send it? And I opened a PayPal dispute. I paid via PayPal. And then he was like, oh, I can, but how can I know you're not going to rip me off for the funds? Can you withdraw the PayPal dispute? And I was like, I'm a bit wary of this, because if you don't send it, I'm down like $100 US. But okay, so I closed the dispute, meaning I had no way to go back to him if he didn't send the record, and I waited. And I waited. There was no record. I emailed him, no response. I had to look on some online forums for the same username, and it looked like he was one of those people who just runs away, gets some money, and doesn't give you what you've ordered. So I was down a Justin Timberlake box set, which may or may not be a good thing depending on your views. But it also meant that I'd lost $100. And I was like, well, you live and learn. But then had a relatively quiet Christmas period where I thought, you know what, I'm kind of annoyed about this. So I'm going to try and find out what's going on. And remember, all I had was this person's username and his email address. So I had his email address from PayPal and his username, and they were both the same. So I started Googling him. And when I Googled him, I was able to find out his real name. I thought, oh, okay. Did a bit of searching. Doing the same searching, I was able to find out that he was in various record collector groups where he'd given away little bits of information. I was able to find out where he worked. I was like, that's quite interesting as well. Then I was able to find out where he lived. Then I was able to find out where his mother lived, and I was able to find out what his mother's phone number was. So it all started to get a bit suspicious. So I emailed him again, thought, will he respond? Didn't. So instead of thinking, well, I'll just give up, I used the information I was able to find just by doing normal search on the internet. I'm not browsing the dark web. I'm literally just armed with Google and nothing else. I was able to then contact his mother, left a message on her answering machine saying, could you ask her son to get in touch with me? Contact his place of work saying, could you make sure that he gets in touch with me? And then essentially email him over and over again at different email addresses he posted, and then find him on social media groups and constantly posting, look, you need to send me this record. I think you may be stealing from me. And it freaked him out. It absolutely freaked me out. And he wrote me a message, and this is probably where I did something that might be dubious legality, but hopefully won't get me into trouble. He sent me a message telling me to go away, in slightly different phrase. And I just said, well, you still owe me money, and I know where you live. And I sent him a picture of his house, which I'd got off Google Images because I knew his address. And to cut a very long story short, he never sent me the record, but he refunded me all of the money via PayPal. Now that's a story of me being a bit creepy on the internet and trying to get my own back against someone who ripped me off. But it shows that all of this data is available. And all this data, it's not that he surrendered it in one go saying, I want someone to be able to contact me here. But actually, I want to be in a position whereby I can use various services and I surrender data to them and I'm not reading the terms and conditions. So I was thinking about this when I was watching the John Oliver video that I was sent to by a friend. And I thought, you know what, I wonder how much data actually relates to me. How much can you find out? If this person who ripped me off, I can identify them and all these data of his life, what is there about me? And a quick Google search and a quick messing around on the internet, and I found, seems that I can find out what my name is, my name, my email address, my various email addresses, various work histories, and it's all because most of it's on LinkedIn. It's all freely available stuff. But also that's aggregated with some data that was on Facebook before I made my profile private many, many years ago, so there's some out-of-date stuff. And there are photos of me, some of them less than flattering, from many, many years ago too. So all this stuff gets collected. And you live, I guess in some ways, the internet gives you a little bit of immortality, but it's data that perhaps you surrendered before you knew that this data could be used in a way you want it to be used. So it is all there. Now, where am I going with this? Well, first is, I don't know where that data has necessarily come from. I can't go after someone to say that data has been used or collected without my consent. Chances are I gave it with consent and didn't read the terms and conditions many, many years ago. And I bet this is true of all of you. The second thing is that there are data aggregators, data brokers, as we used it as they're called in the video that I referred to, which will put this data together and create profiles that they can then sell to people and thereby advertise back to you anyway. So even though you may not have a perfectly public profile on Facebook or any social media platform, even though you may not give out loads of information about yourself on TikTok or whatever else platform you're using, they are still using this to essentially aggregate and sell this data to you, selling data that maybe is something you haven't freely surrendered or given consent to be used in a way, and it is being used for companies by that way anyway. And if you want to complain to your local data commissioner, to your local privacy commissioner, to your local whoever's in charge of making sure that there is no breach of data laws, you've got to try and identify where that data was taken when it was misused, and you probably can't. In fact, you may now find that it's pretty much in the public domain. So it's pretty scary stuff, and it's an ugly side, I think, of the way that data is used. I don't see how the law can really be used in a way. I suppose you could contact each of the organisations and withdraw any consent for use of that data, but these organisations may not be based in a jurisdiction with adequate data laws. You could base them somewhere where they can do absolutely what they want, and if they say, well, if you want me to get rid of it, make a claim against me, sue me, and they live in Zimbabwe, or the company's in a country which is not contactable in any way, and you've got no means of contacting them and you can't afford to sue them, there's nothing you can do. So there's a very ugly side to it. I don't have nightmares about it, but what I do suggest you do is you spend some time. We've got holidays coming up here in Hong Kong. We seem to have holidays here all the time. It's quite cool. But spend a bit of time just Googling your name, and don't just go, this is my name. So for example, I didn't just search Paul Haswell. I searched for my Paul Haswell and my address, the name address, and just bits of information, date of birth, family. And I bet you will find, and just write down all the things you can put together, and I bet you will find with just a little bit of work, you will be able to find a lot of information massively useful if someone wants to sell things to you, or worse still, if someone wants to try and convince you that you've committed a criminal offence and then try and extort money from you, or try and do something nefarious and nasty to you. Anyway, I think it's fascinating. It's probably a topic for some sort of round table discussion, because rather than me talking to a camera about my experiences and also how to get money back from someone who's ripped you off, I could talk about that. I'd be very interested in what people think about it all. But there we go. Don't have nightmares, but do a bit of Googling on yourself and see what's out there. I guarantee you'll be surprised. You could pretty much figure out all of my addresses for the last few years, and you could probably figure out what my mother's maiden name was, and you could probably figure out enough information that if you were trying to contact a bank to rip me off, then chances are you would be able to do so. So please don't go and rip me off immediately. Anyway, that's all I've got time for now. I hope that was interesting. Not really much law in it, apart from the fact that it seems that unless you can't do something in the jurisdictions where you've got access to a local friendly neighbourhood privacy data commissioner, or whatever you want to call them in your jurisdiction, you may be out of luck. But I wonder if there's ever going to be to regulate something like that. I mean, in China, we've got much more tighter provisions coming in now in terms of what data can be used for. But even then, unless you can identify who is collecting and misusing the data, there isn't very much you can do to stop them. And as long as we've got shadowy data brokers, data aggregators, or people who can put this data together for whatever end customer it might be, then you are stuck. But anyway, watch the John Oliver video as well. I'll give you a bit more context, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.